start with chapter 1, cell growth adaptation. So under cell growth adaptation, we have cellular injury and cell death. So we'll be covering only cell adaptation. The cellular injury we can cover another time. So cellular adaptation is done because cell wants to adapt to the stress which is induced by the stimulus, and if the stress is a lot, then these adaptation can be permanent. If the stress is under the threshold, then these adaptation may as well be reversible. So there are three kind of adaptation. We have something called as hyperplasia. It's basically increase in cell number. We have metaplasia, a change in cell type due to reprogramming of stem cells. And then we have something called as dysplasia. Dysplasia means change and plasia means growth. So basically proliferation of precancerous cell. This means bad and plasia means growth. So this is proliferation of precancerous cell is called dysplasia. Note that all of these situations called hyperplasia, metaplasia, and dysplasia, all of them are reversible because these changes are done in they basically are from stem cells, and these they don't have any permanent changes in the DNA, right? So that's why they are reversible. But if the DNA is damaged, so it means they have mutated and they are now cancerous. Okay, so all of them are reversible. That's very important. So let's start with the hyperplasia. First of all, let's talk about reversibility. Well, it depends upon the threshold. If the threshold of the stress is not crossed, basically threshold is if the stress is not for too long, then these changes will be reversible. If the threshold has been crossed, then these are not reversible. Okay, so no permanent changes in DNA, biochemical changes only, stimulus based changes. That's why these are all reversible changes. Okay, but dysplasia can lead to carcinoma, and carcinoma is not reversible. That's very important. Again, hyperplasia can lead to cancer. Metaplasia can lead to dysplasia. Metaplasia is just change in cell type due to reprogramming of stem cells, and these metaplasia can lead to dysplasia and then cancer, and then dysplasia can of course lead to carcinomas. Some examples of hyperplasia. Well, one of the example is that BPH BPH don't increase risk of cancer because BPH is benign condition. It's a condition of prostate. It's called benign prostate hyperplasia. So it's a benign position. It's not a carcinoma. And prostate cancer is different disease. So prostate cancer is carcinoma and BPH is benign. So benign is not a cancer. It's a hyperplasia. That's it. Okay. And why we have hyperplasia? We have hyperplasia because cell wants to adapt to any sort of stimulus that has been provided to it again and again. So etiology is physiological. For example, your pregnancy, the uterus changes. Pathological, for example, pathological hyperplasia, we can say the number one pathological hyperplasia is endometrial hyperplasia, and it leads to endosarcoma carcinoma, right? So that's pathological hyperplasia. Okay, so another example of metaplasia is apocrine metaplasia. Apocrine is these are the sweat glands of breast. They give the odor of the body, and these apocrine metaplasia are also benign, and they are precancerous changes, and they are reversible. Other example is let's talk about them one by one first. Okay, so first is hyperplasia and hypertrophy. So both of them usually hyperplasia and hypertrophy can occur together. Why? Because same stimulus can lead to both changes, and they can share same signaling pathway as well. For example, IGF-1, not insulin. IGF-1 pathway, they can, this is just an example. Okay, permanent cell changes. Permanent cell undergo hypertrophy. Like, what are the permanent cell? Cardiac myocytes, skeleton myocytes. Okay, why they go permanent hypertrophy? Why? Because they cannot go hyperplasia. If a cell cannot go hyperplasia, why a cell even go to hyperplasia? They can go to hyperplasia if they have stem cells. Okay, If a cell doesn't have any stem cell, for example, cardiac myocytes doesn't have stem cell, skeleton doesn't have stem cells, nerves do not have stem cells, so they do not have stem cells. So we can say that because they do not have stem cells, they only undergo hypertrophy. If they had stem cells, we can say they go hyperplasia. Okay, so if a cell wants to go hypertrophy, we need the cellular structure, the cellular skeleton to go upregulated, and basically these cytoskeletons are made up of protein. And what happens that if you want to increase protein synthesis, your cytoskeleton will be increased, your organelle size and number of organelles, the number of mitochondria in your cell will be increased as well. Okay, so pathological hyperplasia, example of pathological hyperplasia, they can progress to dysplasia and cancer. Example is endometrial hyperplasia can lead to endocarcinoma, right? Exemption is benign prostate hyperplasia is not, because it's a benign situation. It's not a very vigorous type of cancer. It's a benign, right? So what about atrophy? Well, we know hypertrophy is just increase in size. So atrophy is quite opposite, decrease in size. So atrophy can happen by both decrease in cell number and by decrease in cell size, okay? And usually the decrease in cell size is done with two processes. First is ubiquitin proteasome degradation system. Well, what happens is that some proteins get tagged by ubiquitin, and this system actually eats them up, it trashes them up. So system that trashes the ubiquitin tagged protein is called ubiquitin proteasome degradation, and other process is called autophagy, and autophagy happens when the cell eats itself, when the cell eats its organelles itself, okay? So this is how the cell size changes, okay? And usually both of these processes leads to decrease in the size of cytoskeleton, and that's how the cell size and cell number decreases, okay? Cell number can also be decreased via autophagy. Cool. Okay, what about metaplasia? We know that metaphagia is change in cell type due to reprogramming in stem cells. And metaplasia, why it happens? Well, metaplasia happens because metaplastic cells can handle stress much better than normal cells, and these are changes in cell type. Most effects on the surface epithelium. One of the biggest example is Barrett's esophagus. So what happens is that Barrett's esophagus usually esophagus usually have squamous epithelium cells, and due to the ongoing exposure to acid, these squamous epithelium cells, they convert into columnar, and columnar epithelial cells are much more capable of handling the acid exposure, because these columnar have goblet cells, and these goblet cells, they puke mucus. So mucus protects these inner mucosa of the esophagus. So we call it Barrett's esophagus. It's an example of metaplasia, right? Okay, so metaplasia, this is Barrett's esophagus is reversible because it's done via reprogramming of the stem cell, right? What about other things? Well, it can progress to dysplasia. This, if the metaplasia continues, it can lead to dysplasia and cancer. Example is Barrett's esophagus. One of the exception is apocrine metaplasia, because apocrine metaplasia is a benign condition, doesn't increase the risk of breast cancer. Apocrine metaphasia seen when fibrocystic changes occur in breast, and this is a benign condition again and again. I'm just telling you this. Vitamin A deficiency can result in metaplasia, of course. For example, keratomalacia and myositis ossificans. I will tell you about these. What about vitamin A? Well, let's go a little bit deep into vitamin A. The story of vitamin A is that vitamin A is necessary for the maturation of immune cells. There's something called 1517 translocation in genome, and it causes APL, which is acute promyelocytic leukemia. And acute promyelocytic leukemia is basically that these WBCs basically are immature, right? So this is acute condition. This is pro means immature. Myelocytic is it's a myelocytic condition, and leukemia is the blood cancer. So the translocation causes mutation in vitamin A receptors, retinoic acid receptor. Mutation of these receptor causes immune cells to be trapped in blast stage. Blast stage is like the cellular stage. This is a blast. It means it has something inside and it's gonna make more cells basically. So the stage is trapped at blast stage. The treatment for this acute promyelocytic leukemia is usually all trans retinoic acid. So you just give the person some vitamin A, and then the acute promyelocytic leukemia is lifted up. Okay, so cells can mature and now become neutrophil, right? So we need vitamin A for maturation of neutrophils. That's very important. Another story of vitamin A is that vitamin A is necessary for the maintenance of special epithelial tissue of the body. Example, the conjunctiva of an eye. What happens that you guys don't really care about the conjunctiva unless it's really inflamed. What happens that the conjunctiva is a thin, delicate membrane that covers the eye, and deficiency of vitamin A can result to metaplasia of the cells in conjunctiva, where cell thickens. The layer of this, it thickens, and it's called keratomalacia. Okay, kerato means layer and malacia is just thickening. Okay, so now we know that vitamin A deficiency can lead to two things: keratomalacia, the conjunctiva, and myositis ossification. What is myositic ossification? Well, first of all, myositis is the inflammation of mesenchyma, and ossification is the bone formation. So what happens in myositis ossification is that mesenchymal tissue undergo metaplasia. What is mesenchymal tissue? Well, mesenchymal tissue are bone, blood vessels, or fat, and these structure, they undergo inflammation, continuous inflammation due to the lack of vitamin A. And what happens is that there is some sort of bony formation which is little bit separated from the bone. For example, this is my bone and there will be a little bit bony formation. So an inflammation of skeleton system leads to metaplasia of bony tissue, and we call this myositis ossification. For example, in the picture you can see this is the bone and here is the bone formation, and this is myositis ossification. And this is, do not confuse this with something called as osteosarcoma. Don't confuse this with osteosarcoma, as osteosarcoma grows from the bone. It will be attached to the bone, but myositis ossificans, it's separated from the bone. So that's the whole story of vitamin A metaplasia. What about dysplasia? This means bad, plasia means growth. Well, bad growth, what happens is that disordered cell growth happens, proliferation of precancerous cells. So basically these displacement of cancer cells happens, right? And this, one of the biggest example is CIN, cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. Neoplasia means new growth, and it is reversible. Good thing is dysplasia is very much reversible as long as you remove the stimulus, as long as you remove the stress, the dysplasia will be reversed. It arises from long-standing pathological hyperplasia or metaplasia, right? If you have these two conditions for a long time, what will happen is that the cell will transform into dysplasia. For example, metaplasia is the metaplasia of small normal esophagus is Barrett's esophagus, and if you guys don't change anything, you keep having this acid reflux. What happens that you guys will have something called as esophageal carcinoma. Okay, you will have that because of the long-standing pathological hyperplasia. Okay, so the Barrett esophagus will turn into an esophageal cancer. So if the dysplasia persists, it can progress to cancer. Okay, what about aplasia? Aplasia means without and growth, so no growth, failure of cell production during embryogenesis, the formation of the fetus, formation of the baby. What happens that in this in this principle, there is unilateral renal agenesis. It means one kidney is not formed, failure to make one kidney. And another principle is called hypoplasia. Hypoplasia means less, and plasia means just growth. So if less plasia is happening, it happens. One of the really classical example is Turner syndrome. It's very common in girls. What happens is that the production of cell is very less in this principle. Decrease in cell production in embryogenesis results in relatively small organ. Okay, so there is classical presentation is called streak ovary, and it's very normal, not normal, very much seen in Turner syndrome. So that was one of the simple topic called growth adaptation, and it usually happens because of stress. Hyperplasia, metaplasia, dysplasia, hypertrophy, hyperplasia, metaphasia, atrophy, dysplasia, aplasia, and hypoplasia. All of them are this is reversible. This hyperplasia is reversible, metaplasia is reversible, dysplasia is reversible, but carcinomas are not reversible. That's very important to know. Other thing is, what should I say? Remember, I must remember this vitamin A deficiency, and vitamin A deficiency can lead to two processes: this myositis ossificans, and the other one is called acute promyelocytic leukemia, and this keratomylasia. So we have three diseases because of vitamin A deficiency, and all of them are metaplasia. So metaplasia is very important, as you can see. So that's it.